So, 1 Samuel chapter 30 there, verse 1, and then lesson 10. Two battles. We'll see two different battles today. One regarding David and another one regarding Saul. It was a while ago that they met. We had read that they would never see each other again. And we'll see how that will most definitely come to pass based on this lesson. Alright, so we saw that David in the last lesson was living in sin because he had lied to King Achish of the Philistines that he had been helping him. David lied in other ways to try to save himself. So David was living in a lie. And the Lord needs to teach David that that's wrong. So we're going to see that today. Saul lived a lie in sin but would not be delivered because the Lord was not, he had not asked for forgiveness, and he was not showing himself, as far as we can tell, to be a child of God in the way that David was. Alright, so chapter 30 of 1 Samuel, starting at verse 1. And it came to pass, when David and his men were come to Ziklag on the third day, that the Amalekites had invaded the south and Ziklag, and smitten Ziklag, and burned it with fire. Ziklag is a city. It was the city that David had been hiding in for a long time. And had taken the women captives that were therein. They slew not any, either great or small, but carried them away, and went on their way. So David and his men came to the city, and behold, it was burned with fire, and their wives, and their sons, and their daughters were taken captives. Then David and the people that were with him lifted up their voice and wept, until they had no more power to weep. And David's two wives were taken captives, Ahinoam the Jezreelitess, and Abigail, the wife of Nabal, the Carmelite. That'll upset a man, right? Steal his wives, take them captive. And David was greatly distressed, for the people spake of stoning him, because the soul of all the people was grieved, every man for his sons and for his daughters. Because remember, all these other soldiers lost their wives and children too. But David encouraged himself in the Lord his God, and David said to Abiathar the priest, Ahimelech's son, I pray thee, bring me hither the ephod. And Abiathar brought thither the ephod to David. And David inquired at the Lord, saying, Shall I pursue after this troop? Shall I overtake them? And he answered him, Pursue, for thou shalt surely overtake them, and without fail recover all. So David went, he and the 600 men that were with him, and came to the brook Bezor, where those that were left behind stayed. But David pursued, he and 400 men, for 200 abode behind, which were so faint they could not go over the brook Bezor. So David and his men, they had stationed with the army of the Philistines and King Achish, but if you remember, the other princes did not want David there. They were afraid that in the midst of battle, David would turn on them and start fighting them. So he was kicked out. Where does he go? Well, all of their wives and children and everything else they had left in the city of Ziklag. So they head back to that city of Ziklag. And when they arrive there, they find it burned to the ground. The walls are demolished. There is nothing left of the homes but a pile of rubbish and heaps, probably smoking and burning yet. There is nothing left here. Okay? And who had done it? Well, the Bible tells us it was those Amalekites. Remember, David had been hiding in Ziklag, and although the king Achish thought David had been going into Judah and causing trouble, he had actually been causing trouble with the neighboring countries, and one of those was the Amalekites. Well, they were not happy. So what are they going to do? Well, of course, they're going to get David back. So well, you know that when David's out of the city and he's away, let's capture his wives and his children, let's burn their city and possessions and take them, and then maybe they would come and fight them and they would be able to wipe David out that way. That's what the Amalekites had done in the meantime. Okay? Well, they take all the women and children captive, and obviously David and his men are not happy about it. In fact, they're so distressed, and they know that this is a punishment that the Lord is sending because of David's sin. David was living in the sin line. They want to stone him. His own men want to turn against David and stone him. They're so upset because the ties of the family is so strong. They're missing their wives and their children, those that they loved. They're gone. Why? because of the sins of this man. And typically, in the land of Israel, people would stone a person. We think of Achan stealing things. His family and he were stoned. So, that's what the men want to do here to David. So again, David's being taught a lesson here by the Lord. Stop trusting in yourself. Trust in Jehovah. Trust in God. That's the main lesson. Lesson number 1. Don't trust your own skills and your own judgment that you think better than and know better than the Lord to make decisions. How often don't we do that? Again, we just tell little lies to people around us because we think we better, or we steal something of somebody else because we think the Lord shouldn't have given it to them, they should have given it to me. I deserve it that much more. Okay. What else had David done? Well, other things that we need to be cautious about. Should we go make friends with the wicked world who cared nothing but the Lord and live with them and enjoy them? No, but David had been. He had been living with these people in Ziklag for over a year, these wicked idol worshippers, these Philistines. So for more than a year, David was living a lie here in the land of the Philistines. Now, finally, it comes to pass that the Lord judges David. He tells him what you've done is wrong. Now, David, we see here, thankfully, asks for forgiveness. He's sorry for his sin. He goes to the Lord and he asks the Lord, Lord, should me and my men go after the people of Ziklag? Should we go down there and try to get back our wives and our children? Should we attack them? And the Lord gives him the answer, yes. Should I pursue the troop? Yes. Shall I overtake them? Yes. You will have the victory. All will be returned unto you. So anything that they've taken, you will be able to get back. That's a great encouragement to David. We can be sure that he passed that encouragement on to his men. And he said, now let's go, men. And they took off and they began to march through the desert land. Now they had just marched all the way from where King Achish and the Philistines were. They had but a short and brief pause here by Ziklag, and now off they go again. Well, on their journey, some of the men become hot and thirsty and tired, almost faint, the Bible tells us. So that David leaves about 200 men by the brook Bezor. They stay behind, and he takes only 400 of his other men, and they go to attack the Amalekites, to fight them. On his way, David comes across an Egyptian. This Egyptian had been a servant of the Amalekites. Okay? So we need to see what happens here in that story there. Verse 11. Is everyone following along there? Verse 11 of chapter 30. And they found an Egyptian in the field and brought him to David and gave him bread, and he did eat, and they made him drink water. And they gave him a piece of cake of figs and 2 clusters of raisins. And when he had eaten, his spirit came again to him. For he had eaten no bread, nor drunk any water 3 days and 3 nights. And David said unto him, to whom belongest thou? And whence art thou? And he said, I am a young man of Egypt, servant to an Amalekite. And my master left me, because 3 days ago I fell sick. We made an invasion upon the south of the Cherethites, and upon the coast which belongeth to Judah, and upon the south of Caleb. And we burned Ziklag with fire. And David said unto him, canst thou bring me down to this company? And he said, swear unto me by God that thou wilt neither kill me nor deliver me into the hands of my master, and I will bring thee down to this company. And when he had brought him down, behold, they were spread abroad upon the earth, eating and drinking and dancing, because of all the great spoil that they had taken out of the land of the Philistines and out of the land of Judah. And David smote them from the twilight even unto the evening of the next day, and there escaped not a man of them, save 400 young men which rode upon camels and fled. And David recovered all that the Amalekites had carried away, and David rescued his 2 wives, and there was nothing lacking to them, neither small nor great, neither sons nor daughters, neither spoil nor anything that they had taken to them. David recovered all. And David took all the flocks and the herds which they drave before those other cattle, and said, this is David's spoil. And David came to the 200 men which were so faint they could not follow David, whom they had made also to abide at the brook Bezor. And they went forth to meet David and to meet the people that were with him. And when David came near to the people, he saluted them. Stop there a second. So they come upon this Egyptian. He's lying here half dead on the ground. You see, he had been a servant of these Amalekites who had been fleeing. But he must have fallen sick or ill or weak, and his master, in a hurry to get away, didn't care about him and left him here. Okay? So David and his men probably give him water and food and nurse him back to health, and they ask him some questions. And he reveals to them all that had happened, that yes, he had been with his master, who was one of the men from the Amalekites, and yes, they had gone into the city Ziklag, and yes, they had burned it all, but they had taken the animals and the women and the children all captive with them. Well, that's good news. Can you tell me where they are? Sure, says the Egyptian, as long as you promise not to kill me or to turn me back over to my master, who obviously would kill him too. David must agree in the affirmative because we don't read anything else. And this man takes David and his men to where the company of the Amalekites is hiding out, where they're a good spot, probably they are on their way back to Amalek. And there they are partying. They are looking at the riches and the wealth that they have stolen from David and his men and the people of Philistines and even a bit out of the land of Judah. They are looking at all of their spoils. There's probably wine to get drunk with, food to fill their bellies with, money galore, riches, coins, gold, weapons, animals. They are wealthy, and so they decide that this evening they need to have a feast, probably get drunk. And while they are partying, they are attacked. David and his men attack, and they attack from then until the next evening. There it is a battle in which David and only 400 of his men have an extreme upper hand on these Amalekites. And they destroy all of them until just a few, only 400 of these men escaped on camels. And they were mainly servants. They escaped. They got out of there on camels to return back to the city of Amalek. David, meanwhile, has gotten all of the wives and the children, all of the animals and the herds and the riches and the money and everything back. But now, where will they go? That's an important part. Okay? So the Lord takes care of them, and they begin to head back to this brook Bezer, and we see that the 200 men who were wearisome and stayed behind, they are sitting there and they greet David. Okay? And that's where we want to pick it up there. Okay? David came to Ziklag. He sent of the spoils unto the elders of Judah, even to his friends, saying, Behold, a present for you of the spoils of the enemies of the Lord, to them that were in Bethel, and them that were in Ramoth. Oh, hang on. No, I skipped something. Verse 22, sorry. That's where we left off. Then answered all the wicked men and men of Belial of those that went with David, and said, Because they went not with us, we will not give them aught of the spoil that we have recovered, save to every man his wife and his children, that they may lead them away and depart. Then said David, Ye shall not do so, my brethren, with that which the Lord hath given us. Who hath preserved us and delivered the company that came against us into our hand? For who will hearken unto you in this matter? But as his part is that goeth down to the battle, so shall his part be that tarrieth by the stuff. They shall part alike. And it was so from that day forward that he made it a statute and an ordinance for Israel unto this day. We can understand that. This situation, this is a pretty easy situation to understand. The 400 men had their lives along with David and fought the Amalekites. They had gotten back their wives and their children and the cattle and the riches. But they had also, on top of that, gotten more spoils. Because remember, they had killed all of those men of Amalek. So they could take their weapons and their money and their spears and whatever else stuff they had with them. They were wealthy. So here come the 400 men. They had gone to battle, and they show back up at the brook Bezor, and the 200 other men salute them, and David says, Now share your spoils with them. And the 400 men go, No way. We fought for it. They did nothing. They sat here and they were lazy. Now I've got to give it to them? Right? How many times don't we do that? We do something and mom and dad gives us maybe a reward or whatever. And then mom and dad says, well, share it with your brother or sister. Whoa, I did all the work and now I got to share the rewards with them? Yes, you do. Well, it's an attitude of the heart that was the problem here. You see, it was the heart. The heart didn't realize and show, well, really, all these spoils that I have are from the Lord. The Lord has given them to me. I didn't earn them myself by going into battle. God gave them to me by watching over me in battle. I had better share them with my brethren who didn't go with me, but who the Lord has called my brethren. And so, from that day forward, it was considered a law here. Now, let's just pause here a second. This isn't really a new law that David's making. But if you turn in your Bibles to Numbers chapter 31. Go there a second. Numbers chapter 31. Numbers chapter 31 in your Bibles. Numbers chapter 31 in your Bibles. Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers chapter 31. And if you go to verse 27, look at chapter 31, verse 27, it says, "And divide the prey into two parts, between them that took the war upon them who went out to battle, and between all the congregation." God has already established this as a law. Okay? You will share with your brethren what you have taken. Yes, you went out to battle, but God gave you the spoils. You will now share it with everyone else. And that's what they had to do. Now, let's jump to Saul. That was David's battle. We'll leave him there. Let's go jump to Saul. Verse 31 of, now you got to go back to 1 Samuel. And it's chapter 31, verse 1. "Now the Philistines fought against Israel, and the men of Israel fled from before the Philistines and fell down slain in Mount Gilboa. And the Philistines followed hard upon Saul and upon his sons, and the Philistines slew Jonathan and Abinadab and Melchishua, Saul's sons. And the battle went sore against David, and the archers hit him, and he was sore wounded of the archers. Then said Saul unto his armor-bearers, Draw thy sword, and thrust me through therewith, lest these uncircumcised come and thrust me through and abuse me. But his armor-bearer would not, for he was sore afraid. Therefore Saul took a sword and fell upon it. And when his armor-bearer saw that Saul was dead, he fell likewise upon his sword and died with him. So Saul died, and his 3 sons, and his armor-bearer, and all his men, that same day together." So, Saul had visited the witch at Endor. He had heard he was going to die. He's now come back to the camp, and the next day he's ready to go out into battle. The Israelites were up on Mount Gilboa, a wise place to be, and the Philistines were over on the heights of Shunem, and in the middle was a plain of Jezreel, a valley down below. That is the most logical place for these men to come together and fight each other. Saul has no heart to go fight. He knows he's going to die. He doesn't say, "Come on, men! Let's go! Charge!" No, he's got no appetite to fight. He's probably sitting back in his tent as long as he can, dragging out to battle. And all of the men, you can imagine them whispering, "What's wrong with Saul? Why won't he lead us out in the battle? Look, here comes the Philistines. They're down in the plain, and now they're coming up the hill. When will Saul give us the order? What is he doing? He's moping around, doing nothing. He's going back. He needs to be up here." They knew what should be going on, but Saul didn't. Sid, you got to go maybe for an appointment, I think. Mom just pulled in, I don't know. But anyways, so Saul doesn't lead his men into battle. He's no brave man. Rather, we can say he's afraid. He's afraid of going into battle. So he thinks he can change the Lord's way. Remember, the Lord had told him you will die. Need something? Let's go check to see if you have to go. Yep. And what happens after that? Well, what you got to get? A few things. Anyways, we can keep going. So, Saul is afraid. Where does he hide? Back of the battle. Maybe if he can stick it out there, if the Philistines really start getting into it, he can just kind of take off, get out of there, and escape. The Lord has told him he could die, but Saul still feels that he can control his own life here, so he hides back there. But that's not true. We see that his sons all die, Jonathan, Abinadab, and Malchi-Shua. The battle wept sore against Saul, and finally he was hit. The archers had gotten close enough to him that their arrows had wounded him. He knew he was going to die. Now, there's no way around it. If he just sits there, the Philistines will capture him and they will abuse him. They will torture him. They will make his life miserable. He doesn't want that to happen. So, rather, what does he do? He calls over his armor bearer, kill me, take out that sword, cut off my head, or push through, thrust through, or whatever he tells him to do, kill me. His armor bearer won't do it because this is the Lord's anointed. The armor bearer can't do that. So what does Saul do? He somehow takes his spear or sword and puts it into the ground, and then he falls upon it with all of his weight thrusting through, and that sword jabs him through, and he probably bleeds out very quickly and dies a horrific death. He takes his own life. He kills himself. He commits suicide. A horrible, heinous sin. A sin that says, God, I don't trust in you any longer. I'm going to trust myself. My decisions are more important than yours. His armor bearer does the same because the armor bearer knows he will be looked upon as one who has failed to protect his Lord, Saul. And so he too kills himself. Never. There is never any situation where we ought to take our own lives. We may be cornered by the enemy. We might be able to say, I'm going to lose my life and in half an hour from here, but that doesn't mean I start killing everyone around me and kill myself. Maybe I'm in a burning building. Okay? I don't kill myself because I feel like I'm not going to get out. I don't know. Maybe the Lord has prepared a way for someone to come rescue me and save me. But I don't give up and give up hope and think, Lord, I know the best way to solve this situation, and it's for me to take my life so that I don't suffer and die. No, we don't know what the Lord's ways are. But Saul should not have taken his life. That was sin. But what is the follow-up of that? So they all die that same day. Verse 7. And when the men of Israel that were on the other side of the valley, and they that were on the other side of Jordan, saw that the men of Israel fled, and Saul and his sons were dead, they forsook their cities and fled, and the Philistines came and dwelt in them. And it came to pass on the morrow, when the Philistines came to strip the slain, that they found Saul and his 3 sons fallen in Mount Gilboa. And they cut off his head, and stripped off his armor, and sent it into the land of the Philistines round about, to publish it in the house of their idols among the people. And they put his armor in the house of Ashtaroth, and they fastened his body to the wall of Bethshan. And when the inhabitants of Jabesh Gilead heard of all that the Philistines had done to Saul, all the valiant men arose and went at night, and took Saul and the bodies of his sons from the wall of Bethshan, and came to Jabesh and burnt them there. And they took the bones and buried them under a tree at Jabesh, and fasted 7 days. So, what does this mean? Well, the Israelites know that Saul and his sons are dead. They don't have their leader. So the surrounding cities here that are close to this, the men are afraid. If they stay there, the men, women, and children, they also are going to be captured by the Philistines. So they flee. They probably head further away from the land of the Philistines, more into the land of Israel. So what does that mean for the Philistines? Empty cities. They go in and they fill up those cities with their own people and take over them. Meanwhile, now it's also time to go out into the battlefield and pick up the spoils. Oh, here's a nice spear. Here's a nice sword. Here's a nice shield. Here's some money this guy left behind. Oh, look, this guy had a pouch of water with him. I'll take that pouch. It's a nice pouch. And while they're doing that, they come across the bodies of Saul and his 3 sons. What do? Well, they desecrate those bodies. Okay? They take them, they cut off the heads, they take their weapons, they put the weapons in the temple of Ashtaroth, and it calls it Bethshan, but that's another name for Dagon, that god of the Philistines. And they take Saul's head and the bodies, and they put them in the temple of Dagon, right? And the bodies on the walls of Bethshan. So that's a desecration of the body. One ought not to do that. That is sin. It's wickedness. These are heathen people. They don't care about the Lord's laws. Well, nearby to this place, probably the closest city in the land of the Israelites is Jabesh Gilead. And these men hear about how their king and his sons and their bodies have been desecrated, and they can't stand it. And at night, the valiant men leave. Probably there's not a very good guard. The Lord had prepared there not to be a very good guard in the land of the Philistines. or maybe they were celebrating so much they were drunk, the Lord had given them into that sin, so that in the middle of the night, these men from Jabesh Gilead sneak in. They go and they take the bodies of Saul and his sons off the walls. They take their heads and they carry them back to Jabesh, where they burn them. Now, we have a hope. That's why we don't burn our bodies and cremate. We usually bury them in a coffin, because we have a hope for our bodies to rise again at the time of the resurrection. At least that's a symbol in the picture. So is it wrong for these men to burn it? No, because they knew that if they didn't burn them, the Philistines would just come again and try to take those bodies. So by burning them, they get rid of that possibility. And then they take those bones and bury them under a tree there. Later, David will take their bones and he'll dig them up, and he'll properly bring them to Saul's family grave and bury all of them there. Because remember, David does care about his best friend, Jonathan. And he wants to take Jonathan and his bones and the bones of his brothers and even his father, Saul, who the Lord had anointed, and bury them eventually in the family plot of Saul. So, again, we can see here how the Lord is in control of all things. David thought his lying would be able to preserve him. No, the Lord had the last word there by burning the city of Ziklag and teaching David a lesson. Saul thought he could have the last word by hiding in the back of the battle, and that wasn't the case. The Lord was in control of all things. So we can know that too. God is in control of all things in our lives. We ought never to give up hope. We ought never to think, well, this just can't be good for me. The Lord doesn't know me. He's not near me. He just doesn't know what's going on in my lives. It's not true. The Lord is in control of all things. He knows exactly what we need, and He's directing all things for our good, as He says so in His Word. So we'll see now that Saul is dead. How will David now rise up to become king? We'll see that in our next few lessons here.